The restaurant was buzzing with activity, a familiar hum of chatter, clinking dishes, and the occasional burst of laughter filling the air. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting a warm glow on the neatly arranged tables. At the far end of the room, a man in a tailored suit entered with the air of someone accustomed to attention. His polished shoes clicked against the floor as he moved confidently to a table by the window, already scanning the menu with a critical eye. He was a CEO well known in his industry, someone used to power and influence. Most people noticed him immediately, partly because of his reputation, partly because of the way he carried himself. A young waitress noticed him too. She had been working at the restaurant for a couple of years, learning the ropes of customer service with patience and grace. She was efficient and polite, making her way from table to table with a calm smile, even when the rush hour was at its peak. When she approached his table, she greeted him warmly, introducing herself and offering to take his order. He barely looked up, dismissing her with a wave of his hand, a small smirk playing on his lips. He was used to people bending over backwards to meet his expectations. "Good afternoon, sir. Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes?" she asked, trying to maintain a cheerful tone. He leaned back in his chair, studying her for a moment as if sizing her up. "I don't have all day," he said, his voice carrying a hint of impatience. "Just get me the special, but make sure it's perfect. I don't want any mistakes." She nodded politely, jotting down the order carefully. She had learned early in her career to stay composed, no matter how difficult a customer might be. Yet, there was something about the way he looked at her, with that subtle air of superiority, that stung. She forced a smile and promised to bring it exactly as he wanted. As she walked away, he called after her, his tone sharp. "And don't mess it up like the last place I went. I expect better service here." The words hung in the air, cutting through her confidence like a cold breeze. She felt the familiar pang of frustration, but she didn't respond. Instead, she focused on her task, moving quickly to the kitchen to relay the order. She knew that losing her temper wouldn't help, and she had learned that sometimes the best response was quiet professionalism. Meanwhile, the CEO sat at his table, tapping his fingers against the polished wood, glancing around the room as if evaluating everything and everyone. He had a successful career running a company that spanned multiple countries, and he was used to people listening when he spoke. Being served in a restaurant was a minor part of his day, but somehow, he found satisfaction in asserting his authority, even in small ways. The waitress returned shortly, carrying the carefully prepared dish. She placed it in front of him with a polite smile, ensuring that everything was perfectly arranged. "Here is your special, sir. I hope it's to your liking," she said, her voice steady, hiding any irritation she might have felt. He raised an eyebrow, examining the plate critically. For a brief moment, there was a flash of doubt in his eyes. Perhaps he had expected something less than perfect, yet what she had brought was exactly right. Still, he wasn't ready to admit it. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, folding his arms, and sighed dramatically. "It'll do," he muttered, taking a bite. As he ate, the waitress moved on to the next table, attending to other customers. She watched him out of the corner of her eye, noticing the way he occasionally glanced around the room, seemingly oblivious to the effort it took to keep everything running smoothly. She wondered how someone so powerful in the business world could behave so arrogantly in a simple setting like a restaurant. But she pushed the thought aside, focusing on providing excellent service to everyone. The lunch continued in this quiet tension. The CEO occasionally made small, sharp remarks under his breath, expecting the staff to hear and respond immediately. The waitress, skilled in her role, ignored the provocations, delivering orders, refilling drinks, and ensuring the dining experience was seamless for all the patrons. She had developed a rhythm, a way of navigating the chaos of the restaurant without letting the stress affect her demeanor. As the meal came to an end, the CEO leaned back, seemingly satisfied with the food but not with the experience. He called the waitress over once more. "You did okay," he said almost grudgingly. "Not bad, considering." She nodded, accepting the backhanded compliment with grace. "Thank you, sir. I hope you enjoyed your meal." He waved her off, signaling that the interaction was over. As she walked away, she let out a small breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The encounter had been uncomfortable, but she had handled it professionally, as she always did. She returned to her station, checking on other tables, organizing orders, and keeping an eye on the flow of the restaurant. Later, as she took a brief moment to rest, she reflected on the encounter. She was used to dealing with difficult people, and she had learned to stay calm under pressure. But there was something about him that lingered in her mind. He seemed so confident, so used to being in control, yet there was a hint of vulnerability she couldn't quite place. She didn't know it then, but this small interaction at a lunch table would set the stage for something much bigger. Across the city, the CEO returned to his office, thinking about the rest of his day. He had meetings, calls, and countless decisions to make. Yet, a small part of him couldn't shake the memory of the waitress. She had handled his rudeness with professionalism, and though he didn't admit it, there was a part of him that respected that. He had met many people in his life who sought his approval or flattered him, but few had maintained such composure in the face of arrogance. Unbeknownst to him, this brief lunch encounter would later become pivotal. The waitress had skills and experiences that went far beyond the simple act of serving food. She had spent years learning languages, understanding people, and navigating complex situations with grace. While the CEO saw only the surface, the layers beneath her calm exterior held abilities that would soon prove invaluable. For now, though, the day went on as usual. The restaurant continued to buzz with life, customers enjoying their meals, staff moving efficiently, and the city outside carrying on with its usual rhythm. In that moment, the paths of these two people had crossed in a way that seemed insignificant, but the future would reveal just how meaningful it had been. The CEO, confident and slightly arrogant, was unaware that the young waitress he had ridiculed was about to play a role in one of the most important moments of his professional life, a moment that would challenge his perception of power, respect, and talent. And the story was only just beginning. After the lunch, the CEO returned to his office, his mind buzzing with the usual flood of tasks and responsibilities. Meetings were stacked back to back, emails poured in at an unrelenting pace, and his phone never stopped ringing. On the surface, it was just another day managing a multi-billion-dollar company. Yet, beneath the routine, there was a sense of unease. A major international deal was on the horizon, one that could shape the company's future and secure billions in revenue. The stakes were high, and the pressure was mounting. The CEO's assistant, a sharp and observant professional, entered the office quietly. She had a way of delivering updates with precision, and she knew exactly when to intervene. "Sir, the investors for the upcoming deal have confirmed the meeting," she said, placing a folder on his desk. "They will be speaking in multiple languages, including French, German, and Mandarin. You'll need interpreters if we want to avoid misunderstandings." The CEO leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He prided himself on his global knowledge, but the thought of navigating a complex negotiation in languages he only partially understood made him uneasy. He had dealt with many high-stakes situations before, but this felt different. The amount of money at stake, combined with the international nature of the meeting, meant that even a small mistake could have enormous consequences. He started flipping through the investor profiles, reviewing their backgrounds, interests, and previous investments. Each page seemed to increase the weight of the situation, reminding him how critical this deal was. He could not afford to falter. Every decision, every word, and every gesture mattered. Despite his confidence in business, the looming language barrier gnawed at him. Meanwhile, the young waitress from earlier was finishing her shift at the restaurant. Her day had been long but satisfying, filled with the usual rhythm of taking orders, serving meals, and managing multiple tables at once. She had learned over the years to handle stress with patience and efficiency. As she wiped down the last table and stacked chairs for closing, her mind wandered back to the CEO's table. She remembered his arrogance, the way he had ridiculed her so casually, and yet she also remembered the faint hint of respect she sensed, even if he didn't want to admit it. Little did she know that the skills she had honed quietly outside of her job were about to become critically important. Years of learning languages, of understanding cultures, and of negotiating social interactions had prepared her for something far bigger than a restaurant shift. She had mastered 9 languages, a fact few people knew, and she had a unique ability to read people and adapt quickly to challenging situations. Back in his office, the CEO was growing increasingly anxious. He called his executive team into a conference room to discuss the upcoming meeting. Charts were projected onto the wall, financial models displayed in vivid detail, and strategies were debated passionately. The executives talked about market trends, risk assessments, and potential obstacles. Yet, amid all the data, the looming language problem remained unsolved. One of the junior executives spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, perhaps we should hire professional interpreters. It might be the safest way to ensure nothing is lost in translation." The CEO shook his head, frustration creeping into his tone. "Interpreters are expensive, and sometimes they slow things down. We need someone who can not only translate but also understand the nuances of these investors. Someone who can communicate the vision clearly without losing the subtleties." The room fell silent. Everyone knew he was right, but finding such a person seemed impossible. As the meeting ended, the CEO sat alone, staring at the city skyline through his office window. He realized the situation was more serious than he had initially thought. The deal was huge and failure was not an option. It was at that moment, almost as a fleeting thought, that he remembered the young waitress. She had seemed calm under pressure, confident and composed, even when he had tried to belittle her. He remembered her polite but firm way of handling his insults. And then, almost on impulse, he thought of a conversation they had briefly shared while she delivered his order. She had mentioned, casually, that she enjoyed languages and had studied several during her travels. He hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now, it struck him with clarity. She might be exactly the person they needed. He called the restaurant immediately, asking for her by name. When she answered, he hesitated, recalling the way he had treated her earlier. But desperation overrode pride. "I need your help with something important," he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "It's urgent and requires someone who knows multiple languages." "I remembered you mentioned your skills earlier." The waitress paused, surprised. She remembered his arrogance vividly, but there was a seriousness in his voice she hadn't expected. She didn't respond immediately, thinking carefully. Helping him could be a big step, yet it also carried a sense of challenge she couldn't ignore. After a moment, she spoke, her voice calm but measured. "I can help, but I expect professionalism, and I won't tolerate disrespect." The CEO swallowed his pride. "Agreed. I understand. Thank you." Within the hour, she arrived at the corporate office, carrying herself with quiet confidence. The CEO led her into the meeting room, where the investors were already gathering, conversing in languages that twisted and turned beyond his comprehension. The tension was palpable. Every gesture and tone seemed to carry weight. He watched as she assessed the room, noting the cultural cues, the body language, and the subtle dynamics at play. The meeting began, and the investors started discussing terms in multiple languages. The CEO could only catch bits and pieces, feeling more anxious with each passing moment. Then, the waitress stepped in, translating fluidly, capturing the tone, intention, and subtlety of every statement. She navigated the conversation with skill, ensuring that both sides understood each other perfectly. The investors, initially formal and cautious, began to relax. They were impressed not only by the clarity of communication but also by the evident professionalism and intelligence of the translator. Deals that seemed complicated and tense began to move smoothly. Questions were answered, concerns were addressed, and negotiations advanced at a pace that surprised even the CEO. As the meeting continued, the CEO watched in awe. He had underestimated her, judged her by her role in a restaurant, and almost overlooked the incredible value she brought. Each translation, each explanation, each nuanced interpretation made it clear that she was more than capable. She had turned what could have been a disastrous situation into an opportunity for success. Hours passed, and the negotiation reached its climax. The investors signed off on the deal, securing the $1.2 billion agreement that the CEO had feared he might lose. Relief washed over him, but it was mixed with humility. He realized that his arrogance could have cost him everything, and that respect for others' skills and talents was far more important than he had ever acknowledged. The meeting ended, and the investors left, impressed and satisfied. The CEO turned to the waitress, a newfound respect in his eyes. I owe you a huge debt of gratitude, he said. You saved this deal, and honestly, you taught me a lesson I needed. She nodded, composed but quietly proud. I'm glad I could help. Just remember, respect goes both ways. The day ended differently than it had started. The CEO returned to his office, reflecting on the events and the unexpected hero who had entered his life. The waitress returned to her normal routine, though now with a sense of accomplishment far beyond her usual shifts. Both of them had learned something valuable: that true talent and professionalism can appear in the most unexpected places, and that humility and respect can open doors that arrogance and pride can never reach. And so, a seemingly ordinary day had transformed into a life-changing experience, proving that sometimes the most critical contributions come from the people we least expect, and that human connection, understanding, and skill can make all the difference in moments that truly matter. The days following the successful deal were a whirlwind of activity. The CEO's company had gained massive recognition for securing the $1.2 billion investment, and the media attention was intense. Headlines celebrated the achievement, but few knew the real story behind it. Inside the company, the atmosphere was electric, with executives and employees buzzing about the unexpected turn of events that had led to the deal's success. The CEO, however, found himself reflecting on more than just the financial triumph. He couldn't stop thinking about the waitress who had made it possible. She had walked into a high-stakes boardroom with the calm confidence of someone fully prepared, navigating the complexities of multiple languages and cultural nuances effortlessly. He had assumed she was just another restaurant employee, but she had proven that skill, knowledge, and professionalism were not confined to titles or appearances. He decided to invite her to the office once more, this time to acknowledge her contribution properly and to discuss potential opportunities where her skills could be put to use in a professional capacity. When she arrived, she carried herself with the same quiet poise that had impressed him so much during the negotiations. There was no trace of resentment over the earlier lunch incident. Instead, she was focused, attentive, and ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. "Thank you for coming back," the CEO said, extending a hand. "I want to make sure you understand how much you helped the company and me personally. That negotiation could have gone very differently without you." She shook his hand firmly, meeting his gaze. "I'm glad I could help. But remember, I only stepped in because it was necessary. I don't usually work in corporate settings." "I know," he replied. "But your abilities are rare, and I think they deserve more recognition. I'd like to discuss a role where your language skills and problem-solving abilities can be fully utilized. This is not just about the deal. It's about acknowledging your talent." The waitress listened carefully, weighing the offer. She was used to challenges, but corporate life was unfamiliar territory. Still, the idea of using her skills in a meaningful way, in an environment where she could make a significant impact, was compelling. After a moment, she nodded. "I'm willing to try, but I need to understand what exactly would be expected of me." The CEO explained, outlining a plan where she could assist in international negotiations, translation, and cultural advisory roles. He emphasized that her input would not only be practical but strategic, helping to prevent miscommunications and smooth over sensitive discussions. Her role would be respected and valued, and she would have the autonomy to make decisions in her areas of expertise. Meanwhile, word about the unusual pairing of a CEO and a former waitress working together had begun to circulate among employees. Some were skeptical, wondering how someone from outside the corporate world could handle such responsibility. Others were intrigued, curious about how her skills might influence future deals. The CEO paid little attention to whispers. He was focused on results, and she had already proven that results were exactly what she could deliver. Their first formal meeting in her new role came sooner than expected. Investors from another country were visiting to discuss a potential partnership that could further expand the company's reach. Once again, multiple languages were involved, including Spanish, Italian, and Japanese. The CEO watched as she prepared for the meeting, reviewing documents, rehearsing translations, and anticipating possible questions. She had a meticulous approach, making sure nothing was overlooked. When the investors arrived, they were immediately struck by her professionalism. She introduced herself in a way that was warm yet confident, speaking directly to the investors in their own languages. The CEO could see the shift in the room. The tension that often accompanies high-stakes negotiations melted away as they realized they were being understood completely and respectfully. The discussions were complex, filled with intricate details about contracts, timelines, and market strategies. Each time a potential misunderstanding arose, she intervened with precise translations and careful explanations, ensuring both sides were aligned. The CEO observed, amazed at how naturally she navigated the challenges, turning potential confusion into clarity. Her ability to read the room and sense the right tone for each comment was impressive. Hours passed, and negotiations grew more intense. There were moments when small misunderstandings threatened to derail progress, but she handled each one gracefully. Her calm demeanor and sharp mind kept the meeting on track. The CEO began to understand something fundamental. Her value went far beyond language skills. She had the ability to manage human dynamics, to defuse tension, and to foster trust between parties who might otherwise have clashed. As the meeting concluded successfully, the investors expressed their gratitude, praising her for her professionalism and insight. The CEO, once again, felt a wave of humility. He had underestimated the impact one person could have when given the opportunity to contribute fully, regardless of their previous role or appearance. He realized that leadership was not just about making decisions or holding power, it was also about recognizing talent and giving people the space to shine. After the investors left, the CEO and the waitress remained in the room, reviewing the meeting and discussing key takeaways. "You handled that perfectly," he said, genuinely impressed. "I don't think I could have done it without you." She smiled faintly. "It's about preparation and understanding people, not just language. You've done well by letting me contribute." Over the following weeks, their collaboration continued to strengthen. The CEO learned to value her input not only for its immediate utility but also for the broader perspective she brought to the table. She provided insights into cultural nuances, suggested strategic approaches for negotiations, and helped the executive team communicate more effectively with international partners. Her presence began to influence the company culture, encouraging others to recognize and respect talent wherever it might be found. Meanwhile, the waitress adjusted to her new environment, learning the rhythms and expectations of corporate life. She approached every challenge with diligence and focus, earning the respect of colleagues who had initially doubted her. Despite the differences between her past and present roles, she maintained the humility and composure that had always defined her. She understood that true skill was not about ego or status, but about competence, patience, and the ability to adapt. The CEO also underwent a transformation. The experience humbled him, teaching him lessons about respect, humility, and the dangers of underestimating others. He found himself reflecting on his earlier behavior, realizing how often he had overlooked people's potential based on superficial judgments. Working alongside the waitress had changed his perspective, reinforcing the idea that leadership was not just about authority, but about listening, valuing, and empowering others. One day, during a casual conversation in the office, the CEO mentioned the lunch where they had first met. "I can't believe I treated you the way I did," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "I had no idea who you really were, and I was completely wrong to judge you." She nodded, accepting his apology. "What matters is that we've moved past it and are working together now. Actions speak louder than words." Their relationship, built on mutual respect and shared goals, continued to grow. The waitress became an indispensable member of the team, her contributions shaping the company's strategies and successes. The CEO, once confident that authority alone could secure results, learned that true strength lay in recognizing and harnessing the talents of others. Through this experience, both of them discovered that sometimes the most remarkable opportunities arise from unexpected encounters. A chance meeting in a restaurant had led to a collaboration that not only saved a major deal, but also transformed perspectives and careers. It was a reminder that talent, diligence, and character often reside in places we least expect, and that respect, humility, and openness can unlock extraordinary potential. The weeks turned into months, and the CEO and the former waitress became a well-coordinated team. Their collaboration had begun as a necessity but soon evolved into a dynamic partnership. The company continued to grow, expanding into new markets, negotiating complex international agreements, and building partnerships that required not just business acumen, but a deep understanding of culture and language. Each challenge strengthened their trust in one another and highlighted the value of diverse skills and perspectives. One morning, the CEO received an urgent call from one of their largest investors. A sudden opportunity had arisen in an overseas market that could generate billions in additional revenue. However, the potential partners spoke a mix of languages unfamiliar to most of the executive team, and the negotiations needed to happen immediately. The stakes were higher than ever, and there was no margin for error. He turned to the former waitress, who was already reviewing reports and preparing for upcoming meetings. "We need you," he said with urgency. "This deal is critical, and it requires your skills more than ever. Can you help us navigate this?" She glanced at the documents, scanning the information quickly, analyzing the key points, and considering the languages involved. "I can handle it," she replied confidently. "But we need to approach this carefully. There's more at risk than just money. Relationships and trust are equally important here." The CEO nodded, feeling both relief and admiration. She had an uncanny ability to see the bigger picture, to assess the nuances that could influence outcomes in ways he often overlooked. Her insight and precision had become indispensable. That afternoon, they boarded a private flight to the international location, a city bustling with commerce, history, and cultural richness. The CEO, normally composed in business situations, felt a twinge of nervous anticipation. This was uncharted territory, with complex negotiations and multiple languages interacting at once. But he trusted his partner completely, knowing that her expertise would guide them. Upon arrival, they were greeted by the potential partners, a group of executives representing different regions. The atmosphere was formal, polite, but filled with subtle tension. The investors were aware of the deal's scale and significance, and they had their own expectations and priorities. Every gesture, every word, every pause mattered. The meeting began, and as expected, multiple languages were spoken. The CEO struggled to keep up with the flow, catching only fragments of conversations and missing critical nuances. He watched as the former waitress stepped in, translating and interpreting not just words, but intent, emotion, and cultural cues. She handled interruptions, clarified misunderstandings, and subtly guided the discussion toward mutual understanding. There were moments when the discussions grew tense. One investor questioned the terms of the agreement, their tone sharp and insistent. Another expressed skepticism about the company's ability to deliver on promises. The CEO felt the familiar surge of anxiety, the weight of responsibility pressing down. But she remained calm, addressing each concern with clarity, diplomacy, and tact. Her translations were precise, her explanations thorough, and her ability to anticipate reactions remarkable. At one point, the CEO noticed a sudden shift in the room. A critical question had arisen about a specific clause in the contract, one that could have derailed the entire negotiation. He didn't understand the language fully, but he trusted her instincts. She paused, considered her response, and then spoke in the investor's language, framing the explanation in a way that addressed their concern without undermining the company's position. The room quieted, the tension eased, and the negotiation moved forward smoothly. Hours passed, and the discussions became increasingly complex. The CEO realized how invaluable her contributions were, not only in language translation but in reading people, anticipating reactions, and managing the energy in the room. Her presence had transformed what could have been a chaotic and stressful negotiation into a structured, productive, and ultimately successful discussion. Finally, the investors signaled their agreement. Smiles replaced frowns, handshakes were exchanged, and the deal was sealed. The CEO felt a wave of relief, followed by a deep sense of gratitude. He turned to the former waitress, his eyes wide with admiration and respect. "I can't believe how flawlessly you handled that," he said. "You saved this deal and probably more than one. I owe you more than I can express." She allowed herself a small smile, modest but proud. "I'm glad I could help." It wasn't just about language. It was about understanding people, respecting their perspectives, and finding common ground. That's what makes a deal work. The CEO nodded, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. He thought back to the restaurant, to the first encounter where he had ridiculed her over a small mistake. It seemed almost surreal that someone he had underestimated so completely had become essential to securing one of the most important deals in the company's history. The lesson was clear. Talent and value often come from unexpected places, and pride can blind even the most experienced leaders. Back at their hotel, the CEO and the former waitress reviewed the contract, double-checking details and preparing for the next steps. She had a meticulous approach, ensuring nothing was overlooked, and her insight extended beyond language into strategy, culture, and negotiation tactics. The CEO found himself learning from her, absorbing perspectives he had never considered, and realizing how much richer decisions became when informed by diverse experiences. As the day drew to a close, they reflected on the events together. The CEO, humbled and thoughtful, admitted, "I misjudged you from the start. I judged by appearance and circumstance rather than ability. I can see now how wrong I was, and I hope I can carry this lesson forward." She responded with a quiet confidence. Everyone deserves the chance to show their abilities. Sometimes it takes the right opportunity for people to shine. "I'm just glad I could contribute." The following days were filled with further meetings, discussions, and planning, but the successful negotiation had set a precedent. The investors were now confident in the company's capacity, impressed by the professionalism and skill demonstrated. Internally, the CEO began advocating for recognizing talent beyond titles and appearances, inspired by what he had witnessed firsthand. Meanwhile, the former waitress continued to prove her worth in every interaction. She navigated cultural nuances with grace, advised on strategic decisions, and brought a perspective that complemented the CEO's vision. Her presence challenged assumptions, encouraged empathy, and promoted collaboration across the team. The CEO increasingly realized that leadership was not just about authority, but about valuing others' contributions, trusting skills, and creating space for talent to flourish. On the flight back home, the CEO reflected on the extraordinary turn of events. He had entered the situation confident in his own experience and authority, only to discover that true success required humility, collaboration, and the willingness to recognize and empower others. The former waitress had transformed what could have been a precarious negotiation into a triumph, and in the process, she had reshaped his understanding of leadership, respect, and human potential. By the time they returned, the company was preparing to announce the deal publicly. The CEO made a point of acknowledging her role, ensuring that her contributions were recognized not just internally but across the industry. She had proven that excellence could emerge from unexpected places, and that respect, skill, and professionalism transcended titles and backgrounds. The story of the deal spread, inspiring others to reconsider assumptions about talent and potential. It became a symbol of what could be achieved when individuals were valued for their abilities, regardless of their previous roles. And for the CEO, the experience was transformative, a lesson in humility, recognition, and the power of human connection that would influence his leadership for years to come. In the end, the successful negotiation was more than a business achievement. It was a testament to trust, collaboration, and the extraordinary potential that can emerge when people are seen for who they truly are. The former waitress had not only saved a critical deal, but had also changed the way a CEO, and an entire company, understood talent, respect, and the importance of recognizing the unexpected hero in every story. After the success of the international negotiation, the CEO's company was at a turning point. The $1.2 billion deal had not only solidified their financial standing, but had also set a new standard for how the company approached global partnerships. Internally, the mood was triumphant, and employees celebrated the achievement. Yet, amid the excitement, the CEO's attention remained focused on the former waitress who had become an essential member of his team. Her contribution had gone far beyond language translation. She had bridged cultural gaps, anticipated challenges, and ensured that every interaction fostered understanding and trust. Her presence had transformed negotiations, earning the respect of investors, colleagues, and even the CEO himself. He knew that without her, the deal might have fallen apart, and the opportunity could have been lost forever. One morning, the CEO called her into his office. He wanted to discuss not only future projects but also to ensure that she felt valued and recognized for her contributions. The office was quiet, the city skyline stretching in the background, and there was a sense of reflection in the air. "I've been thinking a lot about what's happened over the past few months," he began. "I misjudged you when we first met. I saw you as someone who simply worked at a restaurant, and I didn't realize the skills and intelligence you possessed. I want to make sure that your role here is not just acknowledged but also respected." She listened attentively, her expression calm but curious. "I appreciate that," she replied. "I've learned a lot myself since I joined. It's been challenging but also rewarding. I'm glad I could contribute, and I hope my work makes a difference beyond this deal." "It has," he said firmly, "more than I can express, and it's changed the way I view leadership and talent. I've learned that assumptions based on appearances or previous roles can be completely wrong. What matters is skill, character, and the ability to act with professionalism and integrity." She smiled faintly, acknowledging his words. "It's a lesson many people need to learn. Everyone has abilities that might not be obvious at first glance. It just takes the right circumstances for those abilities to shine." Their conversation continued, discussing upcoming projects, potential challenges, and strategies to strengthen international partnerships. The CEO valued her insights, recognizing that her perspective offered a unique lens through which to view complex situations. She had a way of seeing possibilities that others overlooked, and her calm, measured approach balanced the CEO's often fast-paced decision-making style. As the weeks went on, their partnership deepened. She became a trusted advisor, not only in language and cultural matters but also in strategic decision-making. Her ability to anticipate investor reactions, understand subtle dynamics, and communicate effectively proved invaluable in board meetings, negotiations, and corporate planning sessions. The CEO had come to rely on her judgment, respecting her input as much as his own. One afternoon, during a review meeting with the executive team, the CEO addressed everyone. "I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone who has played a critical role in our recent successes," he said, looking directly at her. "Without her expertise, our international negotiations could have failed. She has not only translated languages but also bridged cultures, built trust, and provided insights that have shaped our strategy. I hope everyone understands the value of recognizing talent wherever it appears." The room filled with nods and murmurs of agreement. Colleagues who had been skeptical at first now saw her contributions clearly and began to treat her with the respect she had always deserved. The CEO felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that this acknowledgement would not only honor her, but also encourage a culture of recognition and respect within the company. Outside of work, the former waitress continued to maintain her humility. Despite her achievements and the recognition she received, she remained grounded, understanding that success was not about ego but about impact. She continued to approach every challenge with diligence, patience, and a focus on results, inspiring those around her to do the same. The CEO, too, continued to evolve. He reflected regularly on the lessons he had learned, understanding that leadership required more than authority and experience. It required listening, valuing diverse perspectives, and recognizing the potential in people who might not fit traditional molds. His relationship with the former waitress became a symbol of this realization, a reminder that true talent could emerge from unexpected places. Months later, the company faced another critical negotiation, this time with a consortium of investors from multiple continents. The CEO felt a familiar sense of pressure, but he also felt confidence, knowing that she would be by his side. As always, she navigated the complexities with skill, translating languages, interpreting cultural cues, and guiding the discussion toward mutual understanding. The CEO watched with admiration as she managed every challenge with composure and expertise. The negotiation concluded successfully, strengthening the company's position and opening new avenues for growth. Investors praised the professionalism and clarity of the discussions, noting the seamless coordination and insight that had guided the process. The CEO turned to her, gratitude evident in his eyes. "Once again, you've shown the difference one person can make," he said. "I'm grateful not just for your skill but for your character and dedication." She responded with a calm smile. "I'm happy to contribute. But remember, success is built on teamwork, preparation, and respect. Those are the things that make any achievement possible." The CEO nodded, fully aware of the truth in her words. He had learned that humility, respect, and recognition were not signs of weakness but of wisdom. His journey with her had transformed his approach to leadership, collaboration, and decision-making. He now understood that empowering others, valuing diverse perspectives, and recognizing hidden talents were essential to sustainable success. In the months that followed, the company continued to flourish. The former waitress's role expanded further, allowing her to influence strategy, mentor colleagues, and lead initiatives that bridged international markets. Her contributions became a model for others, demonstrating that skills, dedication, and integrity could transcend traditional boundaries and expectations. The CEO often reflected on their first encounter in the restaurant, a moment that had seemed trivial at the time. He remembered the arrogance and impatience he had shown, and he recognized how far he had come in understanding the value of humility and respect. That chance meeting had led to a partnership that not only saved billion-dollar deals but had also reshaped his perception of talent, leadership, and human potential. One evening, as they wrapped up another successful project, the CEO turned to her and said, "I've learned more from working with you than I ever expected. You've shown me that real strength comes from recognizing and empowering others. I hope I can continue to carry these lessons forward." The CEO, too, continued to evolve. He reflected regularly on the lessons he had learned, understanding that leadership required more than authority and experience. It required listening, valuing diverse perspectives, and recognizing the potential in people who might not fit traditional molds. His relationship with the former waitress became a symbol of this realization, a reminder that true talent could emerge from unexpected places. Months later, the company faced another critical negotiation, this time with a consortium of investors from multiple continents. The CEO felt a familiar sense of pressure, but he also felt confidence, knowing that she would be by his side. As always, she navigated the complexities with skill, translating languages, interpreting cultural cues, and guiding the discussion toward mutual understanding. The CEO watched with admiration as she managed every challenge with composure and expertise. The negotiation concluded successfully, strengthening the company's position and opening new avenues for growth. Investors praised the professionalism and clarity of the discussions, noting the seamless coordination and insight that had guided the process. The CEO turned to her, gratitude evident in his eyes. "Once again, you've shown the difference one person can make," he said. "I'm grateful not just for your skill but for your character and dedication." She responded with a calm smile. "I'm happy to contribute. But remember, success is built on teamwork, preparation, and respect. Those are the things that make any achievement possible." The CEO nodded, fully aware of the truth in her words. He had learned that humility, respect, and recognition were not signs of weakness but of wisdom. His journey with her had transformed his approach to leadership, collaboration, and decision-making. He now understood that empowering others, valuing diverse perspectives, and recognizing hidden talents were essential to sustainable success. In the months that followed, the company continued to flourish. The former waitress's role expanded further, allowing her to influence strategy, mentor colleagues, and lead initiatives that bridged international markets. Her contributions became a model for others, demonstrating that skills, dedication, and integrity could transcend traditional boundaries and expectations. The CEO often reflected on their first encounter in the restaurant, a moment that had seemed trivial at the time. He remembered the arrogance and impatience he had shown, and he recognized how far he had come in understanding the value of humility and respect. That chance meeting had led to a partnership that not only saved billion-dollar deals, but had also reshaped his perception of talent, leadership, and human potential. One evening, as they wrapped up another successful project, the CEO turned to her and said, "I've learned more from working with you than I ever expected. You've shown me that real strength comes from recognizing and empowering others. I hope I can continue to carry these lessons forward." She smiled, a quiet but sincere expression. "You've learned well. Leadership isn't about titles or authority. It's about seeing people for who they truly are and giving them the chance to contribute. That's what makes all the difference." The company's journey continued, marked by growth, innovation, and the recognition that talent and potential could come from the most unexpected places. The former waitress had not only proven her abilities, but had also inspired a transformation in how the CEO and the entire organization viewed skill, respect, and collaboration. Ultimately, the story became more than a tale of business success. It became a testament to the power of humility, recognition, and human connection. A simple encounter in a restaurant had led to life-changing opportunities, reshaping careers, relationships, and perspectives. The CEO had learned to see beyond appearances. The former waitress had proven the strength of competence and character, and together they had shown that true achievement comes from valuing and empowering the people around you. And in the end, the lesson was clear. Greatness can emerge from the most unexpected places, and respect, humility, and recognition can turn ordinary encounters into extraordinary outcomes. The former waitress's journey from a busy restaurant to the center of billion-dollar negotiations was a story of resilience, skill, and the transformative power of human potential, leaving an enduring mark on the CEO, the company, and everyone who witnessed their remarkable collaboration.